national president and the board of the chamber, we welcome you all. And this will be our last webinar for the year. We have a lot to do since the COVID era took over. We're having these webinars on the regular basis. So we welcome you all. We welcome the members of the program committee, led by the chairman, Dave Adebola Williams, is with us. And the president of the chamber just came back from a long trip to Southern Africa and the Middle East. So he won't be available to welcome us in a short remark. So Dave Williams will do that, the chairman of the program committee will do that on his behalf. And I will now try to introduce her. Dame, are you with us, ma? Hello? Hello, ma? Hello? Sanjay, please bear with us.
Yes, I can hear you.
Somebody is trying to join in. Yes, somebody is one of our board members.
So do you want me to start, Shola?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me do this. Let me first thank the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce for this invitation. Oh, sorry.
Just hold on a moment. Hold on a moment.
Okay.
Hold on a moment. Somebody is going to welcome us on behalf of the president of the chamber. Just give me 1 second, please. Okay. All right. Sanjay, we are back.
Wonderful.
We are back. So again, we are here. We'll just take some remarks, as I said before, on behalf of the National President of the Chamber, the Chairman of the Program Committee, Dame Adebola Williams, will just give us some welcome of the President, who just came back from a long trip to the Middle East and Southern Africa. Dame, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obajimo. Good morning, everyone. Let me, on behalf of the President of, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Let me, on behalf of the President of the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce, welcome all our members and our distinguished guests, all participants to this webinar being organized and sponsored today by the Chamber in partnership with Chevron, Nigeria. We are all aware that this long-awaited Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, is basically designed to reform the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The bill is therefore focused on effective regulation of the entire sphere of the industry, thereby replacing all current existing oil and gas legislations. We are also aware that this bill had struggled to see the light of the day, despite its introduction to the National Assembly almost 2 decades ago. It is therefore hoped that this bill will help to provide the much needed clarity on this critical sector of the Nigerian economy by instituting a framework that expands the revenue base of government while ensuring a fair return for investors, as well as promoting equity and transparency in the sector. Without wasting any more time, I welcome the speaker, Mr. Sanjay Nasarimahalu, who is the Director, Downstream Gas, Nigerian Mid-Africa Business Unit for Chevron's Middle East, Africa and South American Company, MISA, who will make a presentation and lead discussions on this all-important bill at today's webinar. We welcome other members of the Chevron team here present, and also deeply appreciate Chevron Nigeria for their collaboration and sponsorship of this webinar. Finally, I want to thank all our distinguished members again and guests who are virtually here with us for sparing the time to be with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish all of us all a fruitful and useful deliberation and interaction. Thank you very, very much. Otumba Toyin Akomolafe, the NACC National President of the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce National President. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dame. So, as I said, Dame is the chairman of the Programs Committee of the Chamber, and he has welcomed all of us on behalf of the National President of the Chamber. Now, we will now go straight to business. Sanjay, are you there?
I am, Shola. Thank you.
Okay, so that's Sanjay. let's read this abridged profile. You'll be smiling while I do that. Sanjay is the director of Downstream Gas, Nigeria Mid-Africa Business Unit, as Dima said, the division of Chevron's Middle East, Africa, and South American company, NIASA. The role he assumed in 2016. In this role, he's responsible for commercializing, production, strategy development, and execution, shareholder management of the West African Gas Development Pipeline Company, crude oil production liftings, and business unit commercial and business development activities. His other responsibilities include sponsoring the business unit's diversity and inclusion initiatives and chairing the oil producer trade sector's OPTS Petroleum Industry Bill Fiscal Subcommittee. Sanjay has worked in Canada on several power generation and transmission projects. Prior to coming to Nigeria, he has held assignments in Nevada, California, Texas, and Thailand. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of New Brunswick, Canada, in 1991. So that's a short introduction of our speaker today, Sanjay. You are welcome. Now you may proceed.
Thank you, Shola. I appreciate that. And thank you, Dame, as well for the introduction. So a couple of things. I do want to thank the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce for the kind invitation. It's a real pleasure, and the timing is most appropriate on this most important subject we've heard about. As a longstanding member of the chamber, Chevron Nigeria Limited wants to commend this chamber's leadership and support for fostering relationships, trade, and investment between Nigeria and the United States. So at last, I'd like to thank you as well and congratulate you on your 60th anniversary. This is a phenomenal milestone for the chamber, and well done and congratulations. It's not as it's older than Chevron by probably 2 years. We've been here just short of 60 years, but you know, we want to do another 60 years worth of relationship building with the chamber. So thank you very much and congratulations. I think you're on mute. I think you're on mute, Shola. All right, so I'm going to share my deck and I'm going to ask if people can see that. Maybe Shola, you can tell me if you can, in fact, see the slides. There we go. Can you see the slides? Okay, all right. So fantastic. All right, so let me see if we can now change slides to, oh, let me see if I can do this. Alt, tab. There we go. All right. So very quickly, I'll just give an introduction on Chevron here in Nigeria, but I'll also cover the OPTS, which is the oil producers trade section, and what a lot of the data I'm going to be sharing and a lot of the information comes very much from the OPTS efforts and collaboration with our membership. And what I'll do is I keep it this very high level. The PIB is highly complex, very complex, and I'll cover that. But for this audience, I want to keep it very high level and simple on the challenges that, you know, the oil in Nigeria faces in the oil and gas industry. And what is the PIB? So I'll cover a little bit very high level, what is the PIB? And then I'll get into specific challenges which we encourage the PIB to resolve. And in particular, OPTS's recommendations on what they may be. And then we'll leave it open for Q&A and any questions I can answer. So I'm going to do this, turn off my video, or if I can, so that we can focus on the slides. All right, so very quickly about Chevron Nigeria. We've been here for almost 60 years, not as old as the chamber. Our investments and typically our operations cover a large area of Nigeria. We do deep water operations and investments there. We have a joint venture with Nigeria National Petroleum Company, NNPC, and they are both onshore and shallow water fields. We've got a gas to liquids processing plant called EGG, which we produce diesel with and naphtha. And we're also heavily invested part of our flare reduction activity in our gas sector. So we have the investment in our West African gas pipeline, and then we have also some shipping companies that we work with. We typically, we've been so involved that we are a strong collaborator with the government, and we have a number of contributions to the government in terms of our investment in our people and in the economy. We are also the largest supplier of spec gas to the domestic Nigerian market. We supply close to 40% of Nigeria's domestic gas that's consumed here. So we have a lot of partnerships and strong partnerships with the power sector. And then, of course, we're heavily involved. We have a strong philosophy of being working very closely and being partnered with our communities. And so we work very closely with our communities in our local operations, but then also across Nigeria. And that's something where our company and our people are very proud of. And we work very hard to enable people and develop them as well. So a little bit about OPTS as well. So we are a private industry group. We are a subset of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We typically make up the oil production sector, where we're 30 oil and gas companies that make up about 90% of Nigeria's oil and gas production. We are always looking at the long-term picture and ensuring that the health of the business will go well and grow. And we are, as a Chevron, very much focused on developing the local content and working responsibly and making sure the environment is protected. And of course, being socially responsible by working with our communities. So the oil and gas industry, just to give you a perspective, is very large. We produce, 65% of all revenues for the government of Nigeria, 88% of Nigeria's foreign exchange as of 2018. That's pretty sizable. We create jobs on several projects that amount to, 600,000 Nigerian employees. That's our contractors and indirect employees and contractors as well. We're the largest oil producer in Africa. Nigeria should be very proud of that. You have a fantastic resource base of oil and gas and hydrocarbons. So that is something very proud you should be of. And then we are the 5th largest LNG producer in the world. Social responsibility over the last 14 years, we've awarded 138,000, almost 140,000 national and international scholarships, contributed to almost $1 billion in community development and projects, almost $60 million in medical facilities and programs, and over $90 million in education incentives. So we are very much committed for the long term and being vested in Nigeria's future. So now let's get into the details. This is really an important slide that really summarizes why we need a PIB. What this slide does, it's rather busy, but it looks at how much resource, the reserves of hydrocarbons that exist below the surface that have yet to be developed versus the capital that came into that country over the period of 2015 to 2019. The dark green bars is the size of the resource. And if you look at Nigeria on the far left, you are blessed with a huge resource base. Absolutely, it's materially larger than any other place on this chart. Now, the lime green, the light green, represents the capital that has come to the country since 2015 to 2019. And how this is broken up is the shaded area to the left is African countries, and the remaining areas on the right are the rest of the globe: Brazil, Norway, the US Gulf Coast, Gulf of Mexico, the UK, and Guyana in particular. Now, what should be alarming to the industry, to government and Nigerians, is that only 4% of the capital that came to Africa came to Nigeria. So $3 billion came to Nigeria, even though you have almost double the resource of any one country in the rest of Africa. That is a strong message about what's happening. Now you go all the way to the far right and you look at Guyana, the poster child of modernization of the industry and its policies. It has a significantly less resource base. But look at the capital that came there, $51 billion. That is a stark message. And this data comes from WoodMac. This is a stark message that the world is changing and Nigeria needs to change with it in order to be competitive and in order to draw more capital. So let me drill down into why is Guyana, as an example, or Egypt, or Norway, why are they attracting more capital than Nigeria? And it's a very simple diagram. Capital will go where it's competitive, where the returns exist, where investors feel comfortable that they will get their investment back and that their risks are mitigated. The oil and gas industry takes a significant amount of risk in subsurface. We drill wells that could be unsuccessful. We spend enough and immense technology and in resources to find resources underground. But the probability of also finding resources we can develop is challenging. But on top of that, there are surface risks, political risks, security risks, and commercial risks that drive also some of those behaviors of managing capital. So if you compare those two countries, these are challenging, the Nigeria versus the rest of the world. And what the message is, capital is going somewhere else. It's not coming to Nigeria. And why is that? So if I break it down into something simple, Nigeria's competitiveness is really driven by two things: government take, that is taxes, royalties, and in the case of deep water, where the Nigerian oil, National Oil Company, NNPC, how much profit oil they take relative to their capital investment, because they don't capital invest, we're a contractor to the government. If you look at government take as a whole, it's quite high. The other side is the cost of doing business in any country. And in focus of Nigeria, this is everything from the high cost of producing a project, developing it, and operating it. Now, if both government take and cost of doing business increases, a country's competitiveness decreases, and hence you don't get as much capital because it'll go elsewhere. So what is PIB and how can PIB fix this? A lot of what we just talked about, government take and cost of doing business, can be controlled within Nigerian itself. You can control it and set it and prescribe it under the PIB. And how a PIB, especially as of late, is it's made up of 4 parts. The very simple parts are, there's a governance around particularly the framework of NNPC, what's going to happen with NNPC, its ability to become a little bit more independent, especially financially. Then there is the administration, which is how do you administer this bill once it's enacted? What organizations, what regulators administer it, and how do they do that? This is about licenses and leases being awarded. And then the fiscal framework, the most complex aspect of the PIB. This is royalty, taxes, allowances, historical tax and carrying over into the future new realm. Those are very complex issues that you really need to have a strong understanding of fiscal terms to be able to understand that and be able to assess it. And our teams have done a great job of doing that. And then finally, the most delicate of all issues is the petroleum community development, the host community development aspect. How do we and how does government become responsible for its host communities? Because we need them to partner with them and operate in a safe environment and offer them some future. And this is a very challenging aspect. Typically, industry does not get involved in the host community development side of things because it's very political. And it's really driven by the communities, the state, and the federal government. We will follow the law. So whatever's prescribed, we will follow. But we have ideas on what will work and what will not work based on our long-term partnerships we already have with our communities. So we have a number of lessons learned that the government can learn from. And as you heard from Dame, this has been a long journey. The PIB has been attempted to been passed many, many times. And it's been a long journey. I've been here only about 3-4 years now, and I've seen this attempt twice at least. This is highly challenging to see its future and how are we going to get through this, because change is needed. I think we are at a point where doing nothing is no longer an option. because capital is going elsewhere. And then the other challenge you have to understand is capital is decreasing in its availability. There's a new phenomenon going on right now where typically capital would be redeployed to other sectors temporarily and then revert back when commodity prices move up. Well, the reality is capital is leaving the oil and gas sector, going to renewables as an example, and not coming back. So the pool of capital is decreasing. So not only are countries becoming more competitive because they want to develop their resources sooner, there also is less capital to go around. And this is a story tied to supply and demand, where there is an increasing attention to carbon management and renewables. There's this drive to accelerate the development of their own respective resources. And of course, technology has come into play where there's increasing supply of the commodity, and it's associated to things like shale development, where you see a spike in shale development that's occurring because of the technology advancements. And this drives commodity pricing lower. But unfortunately, as commodity prices drive lower, costs are not trailing as fast in being reduced. And so costs remain high and lag the commodity pricing that we're seeing. All of that challenges capital. So let me switch to some examples of costs. In Nigeria, we did a benchmarking as OPTS back in 2016 of comparing costs for operating and building projects relative to the rest of the world. And we broke it up into onshore, shallow water, which is anything less than 200 meters of depth, and deep water, which is greater than 200 meters of depth of water. And if you look at this, the average Nigerian cost premium in 2016 for building a project is 69% higher than the global average. And operating costs are 42% higher. Now, what's important to remember is industry has made significant progress since 2016 at driving their costs down. But there's only so much we can do, and we need government to assist in that partnership of continuing to further drive costs down. So while we may not be at 69% now, we are not anywhere near the global average for project costs and operating costs. And we need to partner with the government, and we need the PIB to help address those issues. Another example, and I don't mean this to be an eye test for you, is this is a list of all the levies, fees, and taxes the oil and gas industry has been burdened with since 1997, 93, when the PSCs came out. There has been a significant amount of burden and placed by state governments, by other departments in government, and it equates to an increase in cost of 10%. The industry is viewed as a source of income. And in difficult times, we will be taxed or levied higher and charged fees. And unfortunately, that is going to be something out of our control that we need a PIB to address. This is an example of government take relative to the rest of the world. So remember, I talked about the cost of doing business, and now I'm going to talk about government take. Now, this breaks up into JV oil projects of core source of production and income for Nigeria. And what this looks at is if you look at the PIB and you look at if it is implemented, look at where Nigeria is relative to the rest of the world on government take. Lime green is all the African peer countries. The gray bars represent the rest of the world. And if you look at Nigeria, its government take is 80% taxes, royalty for the JV section. This is onshore and shallow water, 80%. We are encouraging, they drive this down to 55 to 65% range to become globally competitive. If you look at deep water has a similar story. We are comparing here the government take, which includes in this case, taxes, royalty, but also NNPC's profit oil. And if you compare all the countries, gray is the rest of the world. The lime green is African countries, and Nigeria, the dark green. Government take remains very high in deep water, almost 70%. And as I said, we need to be in the 55 to 65% range. Now, if nothing happens, this is what the production profile looks like for the deep water. Now, let me give you some background on what this slide represents. The OPTS has the ability to consolidate the business plans for the 5 major IOCs that operate in JV and deep water. This is Chevron, Exxon, Total, ENI, and Shell. And we have an independent company that assembles and consolidates all our business plan data, and they're able to separate and dissect by oil, by gas, by deep water, by JV, how fiscals will impact investments and thresholds. And what we have here is the major deep water projects at $50 oil price, and what would happen to that business plan portfolio. And you can tell that there is going to be a significant decline of 38% if we follow through with this bill, because the government take and the cost reduction hasn't changed sufficiently that capital now gets not to Nigeria, but to other countries. That's a strong message. But also to remember, the do nothing option is not an option, because if you look at the prior terms, it's not much better. The dotted line shows you a decline. We need good terms that stimulate growth and actually grow it in the other direction. And that's very important. Another aspect, and this is very near and dear to Nigeria, this is very near and dear to everyone in Nigeria, and this is the gas world, the gas sector. As I said, Nigeria is blessed with a tremendous amount of gas, and it's available quite locally, and it should be developed. But there are a number of barriers to its developments. And unlike oil or liquids, you can produce the oil, put it in a tank, ship it off, or use it locally. It has a place to store. Gas in Nigeria, you cannot store. Once you produce it, you have to do something with it. And in this case, sell it to a power plant. Power plant converts it to electricity. Electricity is transmitted, then distributed and consumed. And then the reverse happens. The consumer pays for the electricity. The payment gets to the transmission company, gets to the power company is able to pay its gas bill, and you have a very successful value chain if that occurs. And those costs, the cost of gas, the cost of electricity, have to cover the cost and some level of profitability for those investors. In Nigeria right now, the system isn't working. The system is very dependent, not only between gas and power, but ensuring that the commercial frameworks all work. And that has been a real challenge. It's getting better, but it needs a significant amount more to happen before this would happen and work very efficiently. So I want to just close up on, what we would recommend and what we're seeing. One, this is not an unreasonable PIB. There are some challenges, significant challenges to it, but the government has made a lot of moves forward relative to past PIBs. And I'd like to commend the government too for reaching out to us as industry and asking us for our views. However, the bottom line is Nigeria's global competitiveness and improving investor confidence doesn't exist with this PIB unless it's changed. And so very high level, these are fundamental principles that we encourage the PIB reflect. That it preserve our base businesses and our investments that we made, that the earned benefits that we've earned continue to be used and benefited from, and that contract rights are recognized. This means disputes we've had continue to follow the appropriate litigious process, and that we continue to have the rights that our contracts and our framework investments had in the past. The second very clear message, limit government take to 55 to 65%. That is so important. But then more as important to government take is the cost of doing business. And this is where we encourage legislation to drive Nigeria's high cost premium. Solid host community terms that reduce the need for security. Peace in our areas are so important. But then improving efficiencies on turning around approvals, allowing consolidation of efforts, aligning Nigerian content development requirements with what we can bring in from outside the country. There has to be an optimization occurring and an elimination of duplicity of government oversight and requests. And then enable gas development by deregulating price. Let government be less involved. That is so important. And then most important is keep it simple. Keep it to a simple tax system. We currently have a single tax system called PPT, Petroleum Profits Tax, but now they're introducing 2 taxes. And keep it simple in terms of administrating it. We want to be focused on developing oil responsibly, not on administration activity. That is very challenging. And ensure there's clarity in the PIB to avoid any future disputes. That is so important. And when you do reach a dispute, make sure that we have clear language on how it will be resolved, so that we don't lose investor confidence and we can continue to invest capital and operate. So I'd like to thank the Chamber. Very short presentation, keeping it very simple. But I'm opening the floor to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for that in-depth presentation. Lekon, can you run through the questions so that you can handle them?
Okay, so at the moment, we are yet to have any question, but we have some survey that will be launching that we want our attendees to answer in the next few minutes. So that will be launched now, where we'll await questions and comments from our attendees.
So no questions?
For now, sir.
Nobody is raising up his hand. Okay, if there is none, but okay, there is one here. Is it reasonable to ask Nigeria to reuse the GOVA take, whatever that means, when the oil and gas sector provides the highest foreign reserve? Sanjay, can you read that question?
Let's see. Is it under the Q&A?
It's under Q&A, yes.
And at the very bottom?
Yes, okay. Is it reasonable to ask Nigeria to reduce the government take? That is the government stake when the oil and gas sector provides the highest foreign reserve, something like that.
Ah, okay. Well, you know, that's a great question, quite honestly. In our engagement with government, they are wrestling with 2 things. They're wrestling with, if I can call it, correcting the past. And they are wrestling with what will set and establish Nigeria for success in the future. And if some of us who are in the industry remember almost a year ago, a little less, more than a year ago, where the legislation was passed to amend the Deep Offshore Inland Basin and PSC Act, where they introduced royalties to the deep water. And right, wrong, or indifferent, the basis behind it was really to catch up to some changes that were needed in the past that were never established. But what they have done is, in that decision, they have really made a significant number of projects in deep water uneconomic. Now, yes, they may be right in wanting to do that. I don't agree, but they also have handicapped their future growth. And so when you think about the PIB and the government take matter, You can increase government take. That's the country's right. The government's right is to pass legislation. There's no doubt about that. And we will follow the law. But the reality is, if you adjust government take, you have to understand the consequences of making that decision. Capital will leave, just as that chart I showed about how only 4% of capital came to Nigeria. Money talks. Yet government take has increased, so they're taking a higher percentage of lower production. So it's a zero-sum game. In fact, I would recommend the opposite. They should be focused on costs that we can jointly reduce working with partnership with government, because that leaves more income for both Nigeria's government and industry to share. So that's why costs of doing business is so important of reducing, rather than just strictly government take alone. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, the other comments are more of appreciation about your presentation. They all love your presentation, and they are under Q&A. There is another one. Can you clarify why you are classifying profit oil share to NNPC as part of government take, since same is effectively making NNPC to compete with the IOCs? Should the government take not be restricted to direct and royalties? Can you see that?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Frank, for the question. Well, the reason it's pretty standard across the globe to measure government take, because the NOC is an affiliate of the government. And typically, if you look in deep water, other than a few instances, the majority of the concession is represented by the NOC. So it's another source. And by the way, the PIB also prescribes profit oil tranches required in the PSC contracts. So it's standard. So how it works is, if any party brings money to the table to equate to cover the cost of capital and operating costs, then that profit they take is not considered government take. So that's why we don't consider NNPC's share of the joint venture. So just for those who are not familiar, we have these onshore joint ventures with shallow water and onshore. The government, NNPC, takes a 60% position in our joint venture. And in the case of Chevron, we take a 40% position in our joint venture. They, as Nigeria, NNPC, bring in 60% of the capital and OPEX to maintain that joint venture. What profit taking they take from that joint venture is not considered government take, because they're bringing equivalent capital into the project. But in deep water, they are the concessionaire and represent the government in terms of rights to the liquids. So it is considered part of the profit sharing take. And it's pretty standard across the globe.
Okay. There is another one from Chuka. Somebody also appreciated you, one anonymous attendee, but Chuka has a question for you. Why has Chevron not made any investment to add oil production to its branch in the past 5 years, when other IOCs have projects coming on stream? For example, Total with Engina and Shell with Bunga. Are we not governed by the same legislation?
Yes, so we all are. So there's a great question. And a lot of it reflects to, there's a couple of things. We do bring in capital. There's two things capital does. One, it arrests decline. It is a natural physical geological process that once you produce oil, you get a decline in production. It takes a significant amount of investment capital and people and resources to keep it flat. So you have to bring in capital to keep your production flat. So you're investing. Now, the other, I think what you're asking is there growth? Now, growth is a significant step on competitiveness. And so one, Nigeria has to be competitive with the rest of the globe, and that's been challenging, as you saw on the slide. But two, we are progressing a number of projects that we hope to ensure get developed under PIB. We are a partner in Bonga Southwest Aparo, as an example. We have a number of projects. We continue to do exploration and seismic activity in deep water. We have a queue of projects that we're developing in our JV business. We have gas contract obligations that we were required to meet And so we have to drill to ensure that we meet that obligation over the life of the contract. So we have a large queue. The question is, will we continue to make the investment? Is it possible if the PIB comes out to be uncompetitive? So, you know, we've made significant investments over time, and we continue to do that, and we'll continue to do that if it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. The next one, do you agree that bureaucracy within government has adverse effect on doing business in Nigeria? I think that answer is straightforward. It's your turf.
Yeah, I think, let me translate to the cost of doing business. For example, to get approval cycles, it can normally take 6 months in some other competitive country, but in Nigeria, it may take as long as 36 months to get an approval. So bureaucracy covers, we have a number of organizations that have oversight over the oil and gas industry, and they're all asking for the same information. And, you know, so we spend a lot of time producing information on requests just to be able to meet the demands placed on us by a number of different governments. So bureaucracy is prevalent. It's prevalent everywhere, but it's very prevalent here.
Okay, that's fine. Can you please shed more light on reducing cost premium? That's the next one.
Absolutely. So we just talked about it. So I think if the regulators had very prescriptive instructions and legislative guidance on improving their cycle times and approval cycles, basically, we need government to take a step back away from industry and let us do our job. We know our job well, but we need to be checked on to be responsible about that. That's fine. A key concern is around security. That is one of the highest cost aspects of our business. And that means we need to ensure there's peace in the communities. We have good partnerships with the communities. And so we need to ensure that there's good legislation in place on how communities play a role in the oil and gas industry. As I said, we've got a number of lessons learned. We've been here for almost 60 years. We have a fantastic relationship with the communities. But if it's replaced with law, we will have to follow the law. And we want to make sure that we have good flexibility to manage our communities appropriately. Other aspects are efficiencies amongst departments. So we can't have duplicity of oversight. We have to make sure that, as an example, we talked about the joint venture. If NNPC approves our budget, then we should be having no issue taking tax deductions against that because it's been approved. If NCDB, MB end up approving what Nigerian content we have, then we shouldn't have a dispute again with another organization on what is allowed and not. So a lot of oversight and over the same issues. So I think those are the efficiencies on roles and responsibilities. And of course, stepping back, empowering the private sector to be able to accomplish its job.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, thanks for a good presentation. How has the lack of genuine participation by host communities added to the overall cost of production? And what can be done to mitigate this?
I think you got to be careful with this one. The host communities are very much a partner of industry. You have to be. You cannot operate without the communities being transparent with them and making sure they feel vested in the success of the businesses that they help support that are in their communities. Plus, you don't want to displace them from what they do and how they enjoy their communities. So it does play an important aspect on it, but I think it requires not only federal government to have that discussion, but state government as well. The state governments play an important role in managing and working with the communities. We as the operator don't want to solve the community problems. That is the role of elected officials. That is not the role of us. Our job is to help ensure that we are partnering where we can, communicating frequently, and supporting them with some sort of financial aspect, but that has to be managed between the government and the state and the host community. So it is a significant, it's not the host community that adds to the cost. It's really all the security issues that come from an unhappy host community.
Okay. The next one is also a similar comment. Benga Shokunbi is saying that given the business environment, the host communities, that the insecurity there is an added cost component of the unit cost of crude production. So he's saying, what is supposed to be the impact?
Yeah, no, I think,
on that.
yeah, it sounds like he's agreeing with the principle that it's more of a statement than a question, but yeah, I think I've answered that already. Sure.
The new regulation may not tick all the boxes wished for by the petroleum industry. Please, can you provide additional insight on how the impact of the insecurity impacts Nigerian competitiveness? It's also a similar comment.
Very, very similar. As costs go, you have to have marine security, you have to have pipeline security. If pipelines are damaged or cannot flow, then you don't get gas to the power systems, and the power systems can't deliver to their communities. It's a chain reaction. So, you know, a content community, a peaceable community is going to be a successful community and a successful country and a business. So this is a singular focus that, you know, you hope the host community bill aspect of the bill actually addresses. Again, it takes collaboration and transparency between all levels of government and the communities.
Okay, the last one. Many thanks, Sanjay. From the OPTS recommendation, you mentioned that the gas pricing should be deregulated. How does this improve the gas development, bearing in mind the high cost of gas production in comparison to oil?
Yeah, you know, the high cost of gas production is really tied to oil. So most production, a large percentage of our production in the industry comes from, they call it associated gas. So when you develop oil, you also produce liquids and gas. And that byproduct gas is, rather than flaring it, industry has been very responsible at either finding a market for it, be it the domestic market, power sector, be it the LNG, be it EGTL, be it West African gas pipeline to Ghana and Togo and Benin. So you have to be responsible for the gas. So it's really tied very much on how that works. And if you have a gas price that covers the cost of developing the well, and so we call it willing buyer, willing seller contracts, meaning me as a willing seller, I have a molecule of gas that I need to sell for X, and you have a buyer who's willing to pay for that because they will equally get some profitability for it and get a return on their investment. That is a willing buyer, willing seller type deal. And of course, the most competitive people will get the best contracts. But then as demand increases, which Nigeria has a tremendous amount of demand, you'll have more contracts. And then you'll have the levelization where ultimately gas price will equal what it costs to produce develop the pipelines, develop the offshore production for gas. In that, you still need to drive costs down. You've got to drive costs down. And that's where we need government's help to be able to do that. And that makes it more profitable for Nigeria to purchase the gas as well.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way,
very much,
this is one more point. Nigeria is, when it comes to energy, you do not have, and this is not wrong or right, it's just Nigeria has this structure, governance, where you have a ministry of petroleum resources, and then you have a separate ministry for power. And the two of them, as opposed to some countries have just one ministry, a ministry of energy. And that would be like Ghana, for example. Ghana has a ministry of energy that looks after both petroleum and power. So you have two ministries that need to really partner up, and they do, I hope they do, and work together on the gas solution, because it's a value chain of gas molecules and electron molecules as well. So that's really unique to Nigeria, is that you have two ministries that need to partner to solve the gas to power sector, working with the Ministry of Finance and the central bank. Very Sola, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Sanjay. That was quite an in-depth explanation on all the points raised. We are now getting towards the end of the program. It's nice to see that some other chambers of commerce are participating. we have Kwara Chamber of Commerce. The president is here. We have Yobe Chamber of Commerce. I think they are exploring oil around that area now. Ngozi Philip Ozuzu. She's with Philip. She's with Jeff. Thank you for joining us. Then Are is with us. He's a member of the programs committee. He's a member of this critical committee that is in charge of these things. So as we are getting towards the end, I want to bring back the Williams. She has some things to say before Lekon now gives the vote of thanks. So, Dave.
Thank you very much, Shola. First of all, let me join in appreciating the work that Sanjay has done for us this morning. It's been an eye-opener for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of participants here today. For me, my greatest takeaway is what you said about doing nothing. Do nothing option is not an option. I think that's a powerful one for me. And there are so many things that we can be doing, that government can be doing in this country, such as improving the global competitiveness of the country, restoring investor confidence in the country, reducing the cost of doing business in the country, security issues, tax system, multiple tax system, and so many other things you touched upon, which I really don't want to make a second presentation of what you talked about. I'm so happy that I have taken part in this webinar today, and I look forward to interacting with you sometime in the future. But let me drop something before I go, or before we finish. That is the fact that in the past, Chevron has been one of our key supporters. That's the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce. We got so much support from Chevron. But I must say, in the last decade or so, the support has dwindled. And we want to get back to where we were a decade ago. So to that extent, I know that the DG is scheduling some meetings with Chevron, but we just want things to settle down, because of COVID. When COVID disappears or things get better, let me assure you that you are going to see us on your doorsteps. So once again, thank you very much, Sanjay. I've had a very good time here this morning.
Thank you, Dame, and thank you, Shola. As they say now, stay positive, test negative. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lekon.
Yes, I'm here, sir.
So let us give the vote of thanks on behalf of the chamber to Sanjay and all the participants.
All right, thank you so much, sir. So before I give the vote of thanks, I want us to take a snapshot. If the chairman of the programs committee can adjust the bit, so that I can just get a good view. All right. 3, 2, 1, 0. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So on behalf of the Nigerian-American Chamber of Commerce, the national president, the board and members, we want to thank Sanjay Nasarimalu, the director from Chevron, for your time this morning. We quite appreciate, and I can also see the passion and the delivery that you made this morning, and I'm sure all our attendees to benefited one thing or the other this morning. I also want to thank the chairman of the programs committee, Dame Adebola Williams. She's always been there for us in our support. I also want to thank the team from Chevron. They're all behind the scene. Wonderful job. They putting this together has been quite interesting. I also want to thank my team members too, here at the secretariat, and also the committee members of programs committee. for all their support. The last but not the least is all the attendees. The numbers have been increased. At the second, we had over 300 registration for this event. And then both here and on YouTube, it's been quite enormous in terms of attendance. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best. And lastly, let's keep safe. The COVID period, don't let us take that for granted. And we wish you a happy holiday.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you, Leko. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Also, so some people access to YouTube.